Um, Thank you for joining today's discussion with the OA Alliance, which is, of course, integrating OA monitoring across mainstream climate policy and priorities. My name is Jessie Turner, and I am the director for the International Alliance to Combat Ocean Acidification. And as always, we are exceedingly grateful for your time, interest, and partnership today and every day. As many of you know, the Alliance's mission is to increase ambition for climate action and transform planning and response to climate ocean change. And we do this by accounting for ocean and coastal risks and impacts, as well as incorporating marine resilience strategies across relevant policies and directives. And of course, underpinning all of this work is a process for gleaning appropriate data and information that's going to help decision makers, managers, and communities better understand how ocean is changing in response to climate change and how this may impact marine life, coastal communities, and seafood economies. And while we know that some areas are going to experience more rapid change than others, governments are taking a proactive approach to increasing climate change knowledge and preparedness. And so today I am very excited that we're going to hear from members of the OA Alliance in Maine, Argentina, New Zealand, Hawaii, and British Columbia and Canada about the challenges and opportunities for identifying and mainstreaming this type of information across existing directives, which you will see, and I think, as we all know, is really foundational for climate ocean action. And so we've got a great agenda today, as mentioned, and I'll just quickly go through, make sure I'm admitting folks. Apologies in advance. We've got Dr. Myron Roth with the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Fisheries in British Columbia, Canada. We've got Wendy Garland with the Department of Environmental Protection in the state of Maine. Dr. Carla Burkhoff with the National Institute for Fisheries Research and Development in Argentina. Amy Markell, previous University of Hawaii Sea Grant and Department of Land and Natural Resources in the state of Hawaii. And Dr. Kim Curry with the National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research in New Zealand, as well as a researcher at the University of Otago. And as you will see and hear, all of these presenters have been engaged in either drafting or implementing various components of their jurisdiction's approach to charting out a course for OA action. And so today we have a real wealth of experience and expertise, folks who are on the cutting edge of understanding and thinking through what type of local knowledge and information is most meaningful for achieving existing policy and management directives and strategies. So without further delay, I'll go ahead and turn it over to our first speaker, and really thrilled to have Myron Roth with us from British Columbia, going through the process of putting together an OA and hypoxia action plan right now. So really hot off the press information from British Columbia and Canada. All right, Myron, let me go ahead and share my screen and I'll get your slides up. All right. I think I can do this. All right, Myron, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, well, good morning, everyone. And thank you very much, Jessie, for inviting me to participate in today's webinar. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the traditional unceded territory of the Lekwungen peoples, the Songhees, and Esquimalt peoples, whose historical relationship with this land continues today. And that's from the southern end of Vancouver Island. So today I'd like to give a brief overview of the work that we've completed on the development of BC's Fisheries and Aquaculture Ocean Acidification and Hypoxia Action Plan. It's actually a process that we started less than a year ago. So we've been going quite fast to try and sort this all out. And I would like to draw your attention to the graphic image on the right of the screen. This was a commission by a Coast Salish artist, Doug LaFortune, and it was based on information provided by our advisory committee to have them put together an image to represent, the action plan. And a thing that really informed it, if you can have the next slide, was this Wordle. And during our first workshop, we had quite a large collection of scientific experts from all over North America, States mainly in Canada, And we asked them this one simple question, and we got their comments live. And this sort of summarizes their thoughts on ocean acidification and hypoxia. And of course, the bigger words are when more and more people would say the same thing over and over again. So we sent it off to Doug, and that's what came with the image. That was kind of a neat thing. So if I could have the next slide, please, and I can tell you where it all began. Right. So this process actually started a few years ago, and back in the summer of 2019, the province of BC completed a preliminary strategic climate risk assessment, and they evaluated 15 risks. And they identified ocean acidification as a high priority in this assessment. And you'll see that it's probably the highest on the chart. And so they said it was an almost certainty that by 2015, ocean acidification would be here. But what they also said was that the consequences of how bad it would be was moderate. And that was really based on a real lack of information on what's going on. So if we could have the next slide. And it doesn't take long to realize that it's not going to be here by 2015. Obviously, it's here right now. We've got evidence of climate change in the marine environment all over the place. And the associated impacts on marine fisheries and aquaculture are starting to occur, and we're just starting to see what's going on. And of course, the first place we saw it was in Washington State with difficulties in shellfish hatcheries. Heat waves, of course, have been going on for years. And so have hypoxia events. So we're seeing more and more hypoxia events, and how those hypoxia events influence other things like algal blooms. And of course, one of the things in the action plan was to focus on this sector, fisheries and aquaculture, as an initial run. But of course, we hope to build it out as we go along. And just to give you a sense of how bad it is, there is a paper out there by Smith and a group of other scientists. It was in Science in 2021 that looked at these major heat wave events. And basically, when a single major heat wave event occurs, the direct losses were estimated at $800 million, and basically 3.1 billion in indirect losses for multiple consecutive years. So that's just what people can measure. And of course, the losses are a lot greater when you consider things like the cultural significance of things in the ocean. So if we could have the next slide, please. So in response to the preliminary risk assessment, the province came up with CPAS Phase 1, which is Climate Preparedness and Adaptation Strategy. And they came up with a funding envelope to look at 4 pathways. And in the 4 pathways, there was 3 actions that were directed towards the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Fisheries, one dealing with monitoring and forecasting, one dealing with water infrastructure as it relates to agriculture, but then of course, to do a risks and vulnerabilities assessment for fisheries and aquaculture. We took that and we sort of kind of built it out a bit, and we decided what we really needed was an action plan. So that's what we did. And you have to keep in mind that it was a fairly large funding envelope. I think it was about $6 million. About half of that came to this ministry, but there was ministries across government that were working on various aspects of climate change. So it's part of a much, much bigger initiative. And of course, Phase 2 of CPAS will start this year, and it'll go on for the next few years. So if I could have the next slide, please. Speed up here a bit. I think I'm behind. So this is just a picture of the advisory committee that we put together. This was put together in the summer. And I think what I really want to highlight here is, there's basically 19 members on this committee who are full members who represent 15 organizations. And if you look at the highlighted ones, which are, unique because there's some duplicates, you'll see that there's 15 organizations that represent a very broad range of government, local government, provincial government, federal government, First Nations leadership, and we have industry there as well. So it was a really good group of people to work with. So if we have the next slide, please. So basically, you got the advisory committee, and what we did is we spent a lot of time trying to decide how we were going to do this, and we came up with 4 key things that we wanted to study. And it was the state of the science was the first one. harvesters and producers perspectives was the second one, coastal communities perspectives was the third, and then we wanted to talk to policy and governance people here in the province. And that will then all be distilled down into what becomes our action plan. So if I can have the next slide, please. Here are the numbers. This is a tally of all the people who attended all the workshops. The numbers are pretty good, given the fact that we were going at lightning speed, and people weren't given a lot of notice. We had good participation for the science workshop, very decent and good attendance at the harvester and producer workshop. Coastal communities wasn't as well attended, and part of the problem there was because of the flooding events that occurred in BC in around October, November, which had a huge impact. We got pushed back over a month, and so things got compressed towards coming into February and March. But that's, if we had 2 years, we could have given people a lot more time. And I would say that definitely when you're planning these things, you want to have lots of time. So I have the next slide, please. So I'll just go, I can't really go over what we talked about in each of the workshops, but what we did is we did have someone, credit goes to Savannah Young, who basically sat in on the workshops and tried to create an image that summarized what everyone talked about over the 2 days or the 1 days that were there. So for State of the Science, what we did is we gave an overview of the science and looked at the gaps. And then we spent some time talking about all the observing assets and work that's going on. We talked about modeling, biological impacts, and we started to touch on mitigation and adaptation. And you can see there's various things that came out of that. If I can go to the next slide. So when we moved into the harvesters and producers perspectives, we were kind of building on the first workshop, and then we tried to smooth it out or polish it in the next workshop. So we reviewed what happened in the workshop. We heard from commercial fishers, we heard from First Nations, traditional and commercial fishers, seaweed farmers and harvesters. We heard from the UN Global Compact, salmon farmers, shellfish farmers, but we spent more time hearing what their kind of industry was, what it was about, what the issues were, but talking a lot about mitigation and adaptation offshore and nearshore, and then adaptation strategies for shellfish and things like adaptation for commercial fishers. And the big message that came out was they would like to balance food security, economy, and cultural significance in producing seafood, but also the need for science to inform the sector to develop adaptation strategies moving forward. So if I can have the next slide, almost there. Mm-hmm. So then we met with communities. The communities workshop was more about talking about hearing from various folks to find out what their concerns and needs were, talking about adaptation and mitigation solutions. And one of the things that we did have, which was really quite special, was Sarah Cooley from the Ocean Conservancy gave a great presentation to open up the workshop. And she talked about what decision maker, how they approach problems. And what thing that I remember really, really well was decision makers asked themselves 3 questions. How does ocean acidification rate to my portfolio? How bad is it? How bad will it get? And what can I do? But she also said, when you talk to various folks like constituents, resource managers, or businesses, they all have a different sort of way of looking at risks and perspectives. Constituents might be worried mostly about food security, whereas resource managers about environmental sustainability, and businesses might worry more about business continuity. So everyone has a different lens that they look at, and that's what's really important to try and fold into the plan. So if I can have the next slide, please. I think this is my last slide. So when we started off with our first workshop, we came up with a straw dog of what our goals and objectives would be. And basically and then the next workshop, we then revised them. And the next workshop, we revised them and expand them and revised them, expand them to the point where now I think we have to kind of rein it all in. But we have 5 goals, and you can see those across the top. And each of those goals has an objective. So 2 objectives for, building and strengthening OH science collaboration and engagement. The most, of course, come from advancing science and understanding of OAH, and each of those objectives has actions. And right now, and time doesn't permit, if you add it all up, we have 63 actions that would fall under all those objectives. Concurrently, while we were doing that, we also submitted an application to the UN Ocean Decade to have our action plan recognized as a project under the ORS program. So that will hopefully we'll find out about that in June. And then sometime in June, we actually hope to have the plan drafted and completed for presentation to government by July. And my apologies, I went a couple minutes over.
No, not at all. I am so grateful for that presentation, Myron. And truly, I mean, I am just totally impressed with yourself and the steering committee that's taken on this effort. And I love sharing this example and really grateful for you sharing the example today, even though it's not, of course, still in the process, because I think it's one of the few examples I've seen where you have the climate risk assessment that is then informing the need for an OAH action plan whose goal is to develop and inform research priorities that are then going to feed back ultimately into the larger climate resilience strategy for the province. And I just think that that is such a great way to think about how this process, what do these types of processes inform ideally? So really grateful for your partnership. So glad to have BC as a founding partner of the Alliance, and we'll obviously continue to share out how the process is going in BC. So thank you for that.
I would like to say this is totally not a singular effort. And I do have to put a major shout out to Wiley Evans, for those who know him. If Wiley hadn't been around, this never would have happened. It's as simple as that. And also, all the other folks that were on the advisory committee, it was truly a collaborative effort. I was just the guy who got the money, basically.
Well, we all need people that go get the money. So thank you for being that person. And and thank you also echo Wiley and other leadership as well on the line here today. Great. Well, thank you so much, Myron. And now I'm thrilled to introduce partners in the state of Maine here in the U.S. In my case, actually, I lied. I'm actually not in the U.S. right now, but to share a little bit about Maine's process, which is a little bit of an inverse of what we've just heard to some extent, where there was a strong sense of OA information and priorities developing that then over time have now been fully integrated into Maine's climate action strategy. So really excited to have Wendy sort of share that story and some of the information that's emerging as most relevant to climate priorities in Maine. So Wendy, go ahead and let's see, I can get my slides up here for you. And I would encourage folks to, if you have, we'll probably be really short on time. If you have questions, go ahead and use the chat box to ask them directly of presenters. If you would like, presenters feel encouraged to chat back. If not, I can collect questions at the end and distribute. So thank you for your patience, but go ahead and feel encouraged to ask questions that way. Great. So Wendy, can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can. Can you hear me?
I can. Yes, indeed. Take it away.
All right, great. I'm glad Myron went over because a few minutes into his talk, there was a kind of a bang and our power went off. So I had to, I'm now on my phone and hopefully all is good.
You're doing great. I saw briefly that you exited and entered again, and I can hear you and see you. It all sounds great.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thanks, Jesse. So I'm Wendy Garland. I'm the division director for our Division of Environmental Assessment at the Maine Department of Environmental Protection. And I'll be talking to you about ocean and coastal acidification efforts here in Maine. But first, Jesse, if you can go to the next slide. In case you're not in the US, a little background on the state of Maine for perspective. We're in the northeasternmost corner of the US. Relatively rural state with a population of 1.3 million people. Most of our population centers are in southern Maine and especially along the coast. We have abundant water resources in Maine, including nearly 5,000 miles of coastline, and tourism and marine resources, including lobster, shellfish, and aquaculture are important to Maine's economy. Next slide. So given Maine's reliance on healthy coastal waters, there's been growing awareness, concern, and action around OA over the last decade or so. And in terms of that timeline, OA work started in earnest around 2014 when there was a legislation passed that authorized an OA study commission. And this commission worked over the course of a year to develop a report back to the legislature the following year in 2015 that presented recommendations and described the scope of the problem in Maine. Following that report, there was an effort to make that an ongoing permanent commission, which that did not pass, that bill, but it led to the formation of MOCA, which was a public-private partnership. It included 200 different people and was guided by a 38-member advisory group. And they were aiming to carry forth the recommendations of that report. And they did that through organizing symposia and bringing people together in meetings and getting information out through newsletters. And that work is continuing today, although other efforts that I'm going to describe shortly are kind of taking a greater role now. Another effort that would be worth sharing is the Maine Shell Day Monitoring Blitz event, which took place in August 2019. That was organized by the Northeast Coastal Acidification Network, or NECAN. They organized groups, including 60 different monitoring organizations in the Northeast, to go out and collect water samples and measure temperature, pH, and salinity, and at low, mid, and high tide cycles in different estuaries throughout the Northeast. And these water samples were then sent off to labs and to determine the total alkalinity. And so those initial findings were that there was a wide range in total alkalinity throughout the region and also throughout tidal cycles in certain estuaries. And then another of note would be in 2019, legislation was passed to establish the Maine Climate Council. This group then has picked up on and carried forward the work of MOCA as part of a broader climate effort. So next slide. So the work.
Wendy. I've done terrible things. Oh no, I've done terrible things. I'm so sorry. Having a mouse issues. You go ahead.
Oh, yep, that's it. All right, good. So the work of this Maine Climate Council was supported by 6 working groups, including the Coastal and Marine Working Group. That included several members involved in MOCA and OA work. And their recommendations came together in the Maine Won't Wait Climate Action Plan, which was released in December 2020. And you can go ahead. One, would be great. So that climate action plan includes 8 general strategies, different types of strategies. If you can see it there, letter D does touch on OA. It's promoting kelp and seaweed aquaculture to help lower acidity of surrounding waters. Most of the OA related strategies though fall under strategy E, which I'll talk about on the next slide. You can progress. So those OA strategies that fell under E, that's that larger strategy, included developing and implementing a comprehensive coastal monitoring program, establishing a coordinating hub, and then surveying salt marsh and seagrass as part of a blue carbon inventory. So I'll talk a little bit now about where we're at with those 3 main OA related strategies in the climate action plan. Go ahead. All right, in terms of monitoring, there's a group that has been sort of an outgrowth of MOCA that have been working on doing some continuous monitoring in recent years, collecting pH and PCO2 data. They've sort of informally connected in the past to share information, but there's been a growing recognition that they need to more formally meet and develop shared protocols and SOPs so that the data can be used across the state and it can be shared. So this group they're calling themselves right now the Ocean Climate Collaborative, and I'm not sure if IV is on the call, but there's probably at least a few members of this group, which includes researchers, NGOs, state agencies, and tribes are part of this group working on collective SOPs for equipment selection and use, data collection, and data management so that there's good quality information being collected across the state when we're ready. Okay, next slide. In terms of the coordinating climate hub, we have good news on that front. We just found in the federal budget that was just passed for 2022 a few weeks ago that there's funding to establish the Maine Climate Science Information Exchange at the University of Maine. And so actually the staff person that's been hired with some private funding to get that underway is Parker Gassett, who's on the call today. He has been involved right from the start on OA efforts in Maine. So it's great to have him right at the center of this exchange. The initial phase of the Climate Hub is going to be coordinating climate change research in support of the action plan, but monitoring coordination will also be phased into this Climate Hub as well. Next slide. And then in terms of mapping of eelgrass and salt marsh, that was a strategy recommended in the action plan that would be fed into the blue carbon inventory. The work on that is in the past, Department of Marine Resources oversaw a coastwide mapping program in the 1990s and 2000s, but that program has not been, since then, there has been not been a statewide coastal mapping program. Fortunately, a bill LD 593 was passed in 2021 to reestablish that program, which will be based in my agency, the Maine DEP, and run by Angie Brewer, who I think is on the call today here too. So starting in 2021, we'll be collecting low tide aerial photography using by plane, and then that will be followed up by underwater video work to produce maps of eelgrass distribution and cover estimates for the coast of Maine. So each of these surveys would produce a high resolution image and allow for assessments of change over time. And as we begin to implement this program in 2023, it will be on a 5-year rotating basis along, the 5,000 miles of coast will be divided up into different increments. Our goal is also to secure additional funding and resources so that while we're out doing this mapping work, we can also be collecting water quality, including OA monitoring data along each of these segments of coast as well. Next slide. So in terms of applications of this mapping and water quality data, I'll just highlight at least a few of those areas where we think that data is going to be really, really useful. First and foremost, it's part of the reason we have that mapping program reestablished is as part of the Climate Action Plan's blue carbon inventory, so that we'll be able to feed into that the blue carbon for salt marsh and eelgrass into our figure out how much sequestration we have over time and help us meet our carbon neutral goal in the state. The mapping and water quality data will also support the aquaculture industry in Maine in terms of siting facilities to avoid the worst effects of coastal acidification, and also helping operations modify their operations to adapt to stressful conditions. For example, co-locating oyster and seaweed aquaculture. And then water quality standards. This additional data will also allow our agency to identify water quality concerns and shifts in the biological community, which are essential for helping us assess whether designated uses are being met. Currently, our standards do not account for degradation of habitat due to acidification parameters, so this additional data will help us move in that direction. And the information will also be used as for our wastewater discharge permits and siting of operations, so that we can, inform those licenses and locations by OCA data. And then in terms of conservation and restoration, monitoring should help reveal where there are sensitive populations or chemically stressed waters. These areas could then be targeted for point source and non-point source pollution reduction work in the contributing watersheds. And we can also prioritize habitat restoration in those areas to help buffer acidic conditions. So those are some of the things that we're doing right now in the state of Maine, and some of the key players are on this call, and it's really a great group of people, and happy to answer questions, or I bet they could as well, and looking forward to learning from others on this call. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Wendy. That's an excellent presentation. And I've been waiting for the Alliance to be able to support this type of presentation, because I think it's such a great, just some real concrete specifics in the applied research, how that's informing specific climate priorities and even management applications. And then ideally how those things will perpetuate to leverage ongoing funding in perpetuity over space and time. And congratulations on the coordinating hub for climate research. That's a really meaningful support, obviously, for bringing all this together. So, and of course, the mapping work across various ecosystems for OA mitigation and remediation, in addition to many other co-benefits. So thank you. And really excited to have Maine as part of the Alliance. Like I said, go ahead and just feel encouraged to type questions in the chat if that's available to the speaker directly if we run out of time for questions at the end. But great presentation, and I'm sure lots to chew on from that. So thanks, Wendy. All right. Well, up next, I am thrilled to introduce a friend and colleague, Dr. Carla Berghoff, with the National Institute of Fisheries in Argentina, or INIDEP, also is the acronym. And Carla, I'm really thrilled to have your presentation today to think about how INIDEP, as well as the larger government of Argentina, has been thinking about OA research priorities as directly supporting international, bilateral, as well as national priorities. And you've been really leading across those scales and across different departments. So Carla, can you hear me okay?
Yes, do you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Great.
Cool.
Go ahead and take it away, and I'll get off your screen here.
Thank you. So hello everybody, and thank you, Jesse and the Ocean Acidification Alliance for giving us the space to give this talk. And I would like to, I'm going to talk about the ocean acidification monitoring that we are doing in Argentina to support the climate and ocean acidification commitments. Next, please.
Yes, ma'am.
So I would like to start this talk by telling that the Argentine continental shelf and its shelf break constitute one of the largest and one of the highly productive areas in the world oceans, and sustain commercially important and populations of fish and invertebrates. Argentina has almost 5,000 kilometers of sea coast. These not only including more than the double of coastlines in Antarctica and Falkland Islands, and taking the account of and the extension of our sea and coast and diversity of our habitats and different regions of the Argentinian coast has different variabilities and trends and change in the absorption of CO2 and climate change. Then this is how we came up with these priority issues in Argentina. And as you see, currently there are at least 9 institutions and universities that under ministerial Argentinian Blue Pampa initiative umbrella are developing research on the ocean acidification topic, not only in monitoring, but also on doing experiments to gain understanding of ocean acidification future conditions and biology. Next, please. Yeah. So, what we already know about CO2 and ocean acidification in the Argentine Atlantic sector. Pioneer studies almost 2 decades ago showed that this sector is one of the strongest and highly heterogeneous CO2 sinks area in the world oceans, and the biological pump is playing a dominant role in the CO2 dynamics. As you see in this image, the National Hydrographic Service, who lead this huge and big magnitude monitoring, came up with unavailable information, but also this information can never be repeated, you know? Like up to date, we never achieved this amount of geographically and unavailable information collected. And something important is part of this information is not only available in SOCAT, which is an international global database of CO2, but also it's in journals and in many theses. Next, please. Recently, the National Hydrographic Service from Argentina contributed to the UN SDG 14.3.1 indicator with quality control, total alkalinity, and dissolved inorganic carbon dataset and its metadata collected on oceanographic cruises carried out during the 2005 and 2006, covering most of the Argentina Atlantic sector. In this way, key information provided from Argentina can be integrated with data not only in other parts, on other sites in Argentina, but also in the world. Next, please. Continuing a little bit with the chronology, most of the recent research projects that include ocean monitoring of CO2 and ocean acidification related variables in the Argentina Atlantic sector are carried out within the framework of binational and regional partnerships. As you can see in this collage of images, you can see that SAMOC, STS, STSF, CASIS, the Beagle Strait and Coastal are projects, like really important projects that that have been held in Argentina and have the partnership with Uruguay, Chile, Brazil, and even United States. But something important, as you can see, only two, SAMOC and Coastal, are only that have been running since 2009, are still ongoing. So this is important because we still have little information about the spatial-temporal variability and the drivers along the Argentine sector, which makes it difficult to infer ocean acidification in our region. So we really need more of these long-term monitoring projects to be ongoing and to continue. Next, please. And these needs of long-term monitoring has been tackled by the interministerial Pampa Azul initiative of the Argentine government. And at the national level, this encompasses the Pampa Azul, or the Blue Pampa, encompasses a lot of scientific areas of research and conservation. But one of the key initiatives is the network of Pampa Azul, which encompasses not only the Red Observación Marina Argentina, which is the marine observation network of Argentina, but also the Argentine remark stations to better understand ocean acidification and climate ocean change. ROMA is a national collaborative coastal physical and ecological time series monitoring network all along the Argentinian coast and in the Antarctic waters, which is collecting measurements and at several sites. On the other hand, the Argentine remark stations in Buenos Aires coastal region are part of the bigger initiative, which is the Latin American and Caribbean Regional Ocean Acidification Observatory under the Remarco network. Next, please. So, thank you. So, ROMA includes both autonomous and in situ time series coastal monitoring sites. The autonomous series will gonna soon be deployed. Hopefully, they will start the first stage of deployment in the second semester of this year, and will include pH and dissolved oxygen sensors in different sites. But also, the ecological time series monitoring, there's many sites. Some of them are already running and just being incorporated to ROMA initiative, like EPEA, which is one of the time series stations that we are been running at INIDEP since almost 22 years old. And the newly started station at Patagonia, which is Estación Fija Geneo, which has been running since 2018 and just implementing ocean acidification related variables under the help with the Ocean Foundation. But also in Antarctica or in the southern tip of Argentina in Ushuaia, soon they're gonna start a new time series. Next. So I'm going to talk about the more that I know, which is the time series, the ecological time series stations that we are running under INIDEP. EPEA, which is the oldest one that I just mentioned, also Coastal, which is the 3 sections running along with the Uruguay country. but also we just included a new one, which is more recent and also includes pH and total alkalinity measurements, which is run by divers in a citizen-state context. So this is our main time series in the Northern Atlantic continental shelf, but they are not the unique ones. And we hope to expand this under the ROMA umbrella. Next, please. But in addition to in situ observations at ecological time series, INIDEP is also has been running since 2017 a monitoring of underway PCO2 monitoring in the Argentina Atlantic sector with our new research vessel, Victor Angelescu. And something important about this is like INIDEP has the commitment to monitor and understand changing patterns over time and space, particularly in areas associated with the main fisheries, because this is the main objectives of our institution. And after 2 years of monitoring during 2018 and 2019, we already collect several data, not as much as the National Hydrographic Service did in previous period, but it's been 2 decades. It has been 2 decades since there wasn't new data, and now Argentina is collecting new data in our Atlantic sector. And this data, part of this data is already available in SOCAT database, and we are planning to continue sending data to SOCAT in order to contribute to the global efforts of CO2 monitoring. Next. So as you can see from the overview that just presented, Argentina has a promising committing to monitoring CO2 and ocean acidification. And although I don't even have time to comment about all the flourishing development in experimentation in organisms, we are still at the new beginning. I mean, we cannot fail to highlight the challenges we face of maintaining time series in situ observation in Argentina, like other development countries. And I told this to Vivian Lutz, which is my advisor. And it's important to know that it's really hard to maintain continuity in the frequency and improving sampling on the field. We are having more people dedicated to oceanography and in ocean acidification research during the last year. It has been starting to grow, but yet we are still young on that. And if you want to continue to monitoring on the ocean, not every institute in Argentina has research vessel. And in our case at INIDEP, that we have them, it's difficult to maintain them. And not only to maintain the ships, but also to maintain the instruments and the supplies that we need. It's really hard to get them. And even if we have the money, sometimes it's not only the budget that we have allocated, it's also how difficult it is to get the supplies from abroad. And I'm not going to sound positive, I'm sorry, but for example, in our case, we really experience a problem with our PCO2, and it's been like really difficult to get the instrument come back to Argentina in a really long small period. So I don't know if my video just stopped.
I turned you off accidentally because go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, Carla.
But did you hear me? Or
Yes, I did.
was
Yes. No, we
okay,
got
cool.
you did.
So the important message is how hard, but we are still running, and we have the Pampa Azul umbrella under us helping us. It's really an advance comparing to previous stages of development in the ocean acidification research in Argentina. So I think we are going in a good way, but we still need to be honest on facing these challenges, you know? So without further, I'm not going to continue talking, but next, and I'm gonna thank not only the LAOCA that I didn't mention, all of these umbrellas in Argentina and in Latin America, we have the support of several Latin American and international networks like GoAON or LAOCA. And I think this is important for us to be more trained and hopefully to continue these projects, you know?
That's a great presentation, Carla, and so appreciate you giving it and just being part of this effort over the last several years and being willing to share out on it. And totally, I mean, this so makes the case to policymakers, particularly in the climate space, but of course in the coastal marine space too, about the significance of the time series. And I have personally found, I'm sure you have too, that communicating the time series needs for meaningful coastal information and response is one of the hardest things to do in the policy context. Yes. With people that are not practitioners or not familiar, myself included. And so having examples like the regional coordination under things like Pampa Azul, but also showing how you're incorporating all these various OA related parameters across research and conservation frameworks that already exist really helps make that case. So so thank you for sharing that out. And I think it's a really important case study for showing what's possible with that sort of sustained support and ideally the continued sustained support. So thank you, Carla.
Thank you for the space, Jessie.
Good to see you, my friend. Great. Well, I am very happy. Per usual, we'll probably go a little bit over our time, but I'm really encouraging people to stay on 5 minutes or so because the next two presentations will be 8 minutes apiece, and they are excellent as well. So I'd like to introduce my friend and colleague, Amy Markel. Amy, if you can hear me okay.
Yep, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. I'll let you take it away. And you have been instrumental in putting together Hawaii's OA action plan. And I really am happy to have the opportunity to share out some of the context for the action plan, but really some of the next steps and where the action plan has helped inform ongoing monitoring. So over to you, my friend.
Thanks, Jessie, and thanks for making the space. And I'm learning so much from all the other presenters. So I'm honored to be included with this remarkable list of people. I was previously the Sea Grant Graw Fellow for the Division of Aquatic Resources, Department of Land and Natural Resources, State of Hawaii. And during that time, I developed the first version of the State of Hawaii's OA Action Plan. I'm now a PhD student with Dr. Chris Sabine in the Department of Oceanography at the University of Hawaii, Manoa, and I'll get into why that's relevant a little bit later in the presentation. Next slide. Just an overview, we're gonna go over the Hawaii OA Action Plan. We're gonna deep dive into some of our updates on increasing scientific understanding in the region, and then I'll give you more progress on these actions to date. So the State of Hawaii Ocean Acidification Action Plan, if you can find it online, it is the first of an iterative planning document, just so you're all aware, and it's providing that vision that we'll need for coordinating action around ocean acidification and climate, ocean climate nexus. And next. So how did it come to be? Well, in 2008, our governor from the state of Hawaii joined the International Alliance as a state member, and in so agreed to develop an OA action plan. The Department of Land and Natural Resources, Division of Aquatic Resources was identified as the lead division for the effort to develop an action plan for the state. And so the division decided to utilize the OA toolkit developed by the International Alliance and began to start engaging with other departments in the state, including Department of Land and Natural Resources, Department of Agriculture, which hosts our aquaculture division, Department of Health, who does our water quality monitoring for the state, as well as partners from the University of Hawaii, including the School of Ocean and Earth Science and Technology, Sea Grant College Program, Pacific Islands Ocean Observing System, PAC-IOS, as well as our International Alliance and NOAA partners. Next slide. So how did we go about introducing the idea of OA and even go about developing an action plan? Well, we decided to host a series of webinars, and they included Dr. Chris Sabine from SOAS, Dr. Hannah Barkley from NOAA, Jessie Turner here, and myself. And we started out with an internal presentation to the division, and then reached out to those external partners that I just listed and received a lot of feedback on the suggested methods for working group and process of action plan development. Next. Unfortunately, although we had a commitment to write an action plan, there was no formal or mandated task force or working group to actually develop the plan. And at the beginning of COVID, this restricted the type of workshops and gatherings that were possible. So we decided to go with the smaller topic-based meetings and in-kind participation, as well as joining other working groups that are already existing. So to get at our monitoring capacity and what we had currently, the state of the science, we convened a meeting with the University of Hawaii, Division of Aquatic Resources, Department of Health, specifically the Clean Water Branch, who does the water quality monitoring for Hawaii, PAC-IOS, and NOAA's Ecosystem Division to talk. And then for our climate work, we worked with the state's climate commission and the Climate Ready Hawaii framework and had our goals approved by the state climate commission and continue to work with them. For land-based pollution, we hopped on the working groups for Hawaii's coral reef strategy, the state of Hawaii program plan, and office planning. For aquaculture industry and our local resource users, we talked to our Department of Agriculture, who works with our aquaculture specialists, met industry leaders at the Aquaculture America Conference, spoke with our extension agents from University of Hawaii Sea Grant for aquaculture and our grassroots organization for cultural practitioners, KUA or Kua Aina Uluwamo, and specifically met with the fish pond coordinator. Our fish pond is our indigenous aquaculture in Hawaii. And the goal of meeting with all of these groups and being a part of these different working groups was to identify actions already being taken by these groups or potential actions that they could take within their scope of working capacity. Next slide. And this led to the development of these 5 goals here. And just for time, I'm just going to let you read them up on the screen. But they model pretty similarly to what the toolkit outlines, and where we get into the specifics of Hawaii specific objectives and actions is later in the plan. And I'll get into a little bit of some of those. So going to the next slide, we'll jump into goal 1, increasing the scientific understanding of OA in the region. Next. And one of the ways that we did that was by convening the different departments. We wanted to make sure that we aligned biological monitoring with our water quality monitoring. So we got commitments from both the State Department of Health, Clean Water Branch, to provide all data collected from their current and ongoing monitoring efforts, as well as the Division of Aquatic Resources for biological monitoring that intersects and overlaps with our water quality data. Next. Another thing that we wanted to do was increase our spatial coverage and temporal data sets available across the main Hawaiian Islands. We're fortunate enough that we have autonomous map CO2 buoys that are around the island of Oahu. We actually have 4. So we wanted to redistribute at least 2 of those to neighbor islands to get better archipelago coverage. Next. The other thing that we know we needed to do was look into a vulnerability analysis. And one of the things that's exciting about work coming up is the Ocean Acidification Program with NOAA has funded a regional vulnerability assessment in the Hawaiian archipelago. And it's going to be using a modeling approach using the ROMS cobalt model to link ecosystem and with societal outcomes at relevant scales. As you can see on the right, that diagram there shows the high variability we have at a large scale, but for planning and community conversation, we're really looking for that finer resolution scale. So linking the state-of-the-art climate, regional, and coral reef ecosystem models with satellite assessments of acidification is going to be very useful for that. And then to actually get at what the vulnerability will be once we get that ecological physical data set, using social components collected through interviews, workshops, and community surveys will be vital. Next slide. So any other progress on these actions to date, besides what I just mentioned with the vulnerability analysis, we also have, next, new monitoring efforts, including more buoys. So The University of Hawaii has received funding to deploy 3 buoys off of neighbor islands. Like I mentioned, we'll be distributing the 2 MAP CO2 buoys from which autonomously collect ocean acidification parameters, and we will be purchasing 1 new buoy. These buoys are all going to be outfit with the NOAA standard sensors, so we have high quality autonomous data, and we'll still have 2 buoys off of Oahu. We're also partnering with Saildrone to do nearshore coastal monitoring of the same parameters as the MAP CO2 buoys, and we'll fill in areas that the Saildrone will not go with nearshore coastal boat cruises. Next. So for the 5-year outlook, some of the exciting things that we should expect to see is some new temporal data for islands, which we previously did not have before. From Saildrone, we'll have finer resolution nearshore data with high spatial coverage, and we'll have that vulnerability assessment, which really gives us a finer resolution model linked with our satellite data, and as well as social data paired with that biological data. And we'll be able to integrate all these updates and data sets into a revised action plan for 2020, and then again in 2020 or 2030, excuse me. And next slide. And just wanted to say thanks and really appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit. And I'm sorry we're cutting it really close to time for the next presenter.
No, thank you so much, Amy. Excellent presentation. I will cut my own commentary, but know that I am grateful for the state of Hawaii and yourself and all of your partners for putting this together. And it's great to see this progress in action. So we will stay connected on more share outs. And last but not least, I invite everyone, or really encourage everyone, to stay on for the next 7-8 minutes if you're able to. Dr. Kim Curry from NIWA in New Zealand. Kim, can you hear me okay? And I apologize to you directly. I'm hoping that you are able to stay on as well.
Yeah, kia ora, Jessie, I can hear you. Thank you.
Great. And do you know this is recorded for all of our partners, so this, we're not speaking into the void entirely, and we'll make sure this is packaged and available. But would you like to share your screen instead of me sharing mine?
It says, Jessie, I can't share while you're other, but thank you.
Looks great.
Thank you. So kia ora koutou, ko Kim Curry tōku ingoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou ia Aotearoa. So hey everyone, it's good morning from me in New Zealand. Good evening to some of you across the world, but I'm Kim Curry from NIWA in New Zealand. So I'd like to thank Jessie and the OA Alliance and the other speakers for putting together this webinar, but also giving me the opportunity to share some of the work that we're doing in New Zealand, combining the science with various policy initiatives. So the New Zealand ocean acidification community is a group of around 250 scientists, policymakers, representatives from our Māori community, aquaculture operators, and anyone basically who's interested in understanding the impact or issues around ocean acidification in New Zealand. And we're a loose affiliation. There's nothing formal about this community, but we've got a council, and there's a newsletter that comes out monthly, and we have an annual workshop. So basically, this is an effective mechanism for bringing together the many stakeholders who are interested in ocean acidification in New Zealand. One of the activities that we've been doing is contributing to the development of an OA action plan. This has been led by our Ministry for the Environment. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade in New Zealand is leading the contribution of New Zealand and ocean acidification to the Commonwealth Blue Charter. So New Zealand's the champion for ocean acidification for the Commonwealth Blue Charter. We held a meeting, an in-person meeting of Commonwealth peoples who are interested in ocean acidification a couple of years ago now, and we've produced a policymaker's handbook for addressing the impacts of ocean acidification, which will lead on to an online training for policymakers. So New Zealand and the various stakeholders within New Zealand have been active in the ocean acidification ocean acidification work, and we're highly integrated, I suppose, as a community. So one of the strengths of ocean acidification work in New Zealand is this collaborative environment, and this is underpinned by a strong research and observing program. In 1998, we started measuring carbonate chemistry along a transect, which has turned into the Munida time series. And so this is over the 23 odd years since 1998, has measured a change in the carbonate chemistry directly in the waters around New Zealand, where we've observed the pH declining as a result of the increasing atmospheric CO2. However, we recognised we needed an understanding of coastal conditions, and so this kind of realisation was happening at the same time that the Global Ocean Acidification Observing Network GOAON was bringing together workers with similar interests around the world, looking at coastal acidification. So we got started developing a New Zealand Ocean Acidification Observing Network. Initially, this started with 10 sites and it was funded from research funding. We wanted a mixture of sites countrywide, pristine, impacted, sites that were relevant to the industry, particularly the aquaculture and fisheries industries, society relevant and relevant to our Maori people. The program initially started with a bottle sampling program with the idea of adding sensors as the observing network developed. We needed sampling partners to help us collect the water samples that were required for this network. So we called in existing collaborations and connections, industry groups that we knew would be interested, and in some cases we just went cold calling, asking people if they would help to get this ocean acidification observing network off the ground. So in order to work with these sampling partners, we approached them with a brief overview of what we wanted to do. We presented our vision of an ocean acidification coastal network for New Zealand. We talked about what they might need out of a network, what we might need from them as partners, what we could give them, and what we would like them to do, which was basically to collect water samples for us using our protocols and sending those samples to a central lab in Dunedin where I work. So that program's been running since 2015. The data are publicly available on the website and are provided directly to the sampling partners. It's linked into the GOAON portal, and these data have been submitted to as New Zealand's country reporting towards the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 14.3 on ocean acidity. The data have also been used by the Ministry for the Environment in their environmental reporting. Our Marine Environment is the name of that report, and have also contributed to the provisional statement on the state of the global climate by the WMO. The data informs experiments. It's been used by university and school projects, and it's been the subject of scientific publication. I gave a presentation at a coastal conference, and I met Monique from our Department of Conservation Te Papa Atawhai. They were developing their climate change adaptation action plan, which included monitoring climate change in terrestrial and marine jurisdictions of theirs. So after some discussions with Monique, they decided that they would join the New Zealand Ocean Acidification Observing Network and use our infrastructure to help their monitoring aims. So they've started in partnership with the Ocean Acidification Observing Network, monitoring at 10 marine reserves. And they work in turn with community and iwi partners to collect the water samples in the marine reserves. Some of our original partners were from regional councils, but we've formed a particular relationship with the Waikato Regional Council in the north of New Zealand here. They're particularly interested in ocean acidification because of the impacts of ocean acidification in this embayment here, the Firth of Thames. So they have worked by developing a ocean acidification fact sheet specific for the area. They commissioned a report on impacts on ocean acidification in their area, and they identified some issues that were of particular relevance to their coastal area. In particular, they're interested in the role of nutrient runoff and modifying the pH, and the effect that nutrient limit setting, that's terrestrial nutrient limit setting in the agricultural sector, might have on future acidification of their coastal areas. And they're interested in the relationships between acidification in their coast and aquaculture, including finfish. So they have joined the Ocean Acidification Network by including OA sampling at 5 of their monitoring sites where they're already monitoring environmental parameters. So they now take ocean acidification samples using the kits that we provide. Another council in Wellington have also included OA monitoring at a buoy site that they've got for monitoring the impact of one of their rivers coming into their harbour. So these 3 organisations, DOC, the Waikato Regional Council and the Greater Wellington Council, have joined the network, but they contribute financially. Basically, we have a contract with them to pay. So the original sites were funded out of a research budget, but as we've expanded beyond what we can afford from that budget, these new partners are paying to join, and that has been critical in enabling us to expand our network in this way. But as part of that contract that we have with them, they have joined the collective, and so they use the same sampling protocols, contribute the data in the same way, and once their data becomes part of the observing network, it is used then as part of the collective. So they've agreed to join the network in its entirety. So this map here shows now our sites dotted around New Zealand. We've now got fairly good coverage, and as you can see, we've got sample partners from a large range of stakeholders, ranging from local government, research industry, there's the aquaculture industry working with us, fishing industry, Maori people, a port authority, the Department of Conservation, those 10 marine reserve sites, the regional councils, and there's the original Munida time series transect that's been running since 1998, which we've also tied into this OA network. So Jessie asked me to address a couple of questions around OA monitoring to inform policy. So do these collaborations provide a blueprint for integrating ocean and coastal monitoring across other climate, marine, environment directives? So I would say absolutely yes. And the key thing here is communication, making sure that everyone is aware of the responsibilities that they have, what they contribute, how they will operate, and who is doing what. These collaborations can link into existing networks. So not only the Ocean Acidification Observing Network, but also regional council monitoring networks, the DOC Marine Reserve Network. I think it's really an important way of leveraging off existing components and providing more added value by connecting them together. Having the data then become a part of the collective, I think, is a really important part of this collaboration. And it also provides a community of practice where not only are people collecting samples and interested in the OA, but they join the community as a whole. The second question that Jessie asked me to address was, what is the most important thing to consider when determining where to expand coastal monitoring to inform policy and decision making? And I think I've got a couple of ideas around this. So the first one is to really sit down and talk with the people who are going to be involved to identify the questions that you're trying to address. And so some of them are science questions, some of them are policy questions, some of them will be social relevance questions, some of them may be culturally significant questions if you're working with Maori people or local coastal people. So I think by sitting down and actually talking about what it is that you want to know, what questions it is that you are trying to answer, that then allows you to target the monitoring component. And then once you've done that, I think that would lead to all of those stakeholders being involved in the decision making. You can then leverage existing resources and also have some commitment from the various players who are involved in the sampling for a particular area, and also an understanding that not only are they committing for the next sampling trip or the next year, that really if you're wanting to monitor ocean acidification, you're in for the long haul, particularly in coastal areas where you might not see any change for years to come. Yep. So with that, I'll stop. Thank you very much. I'd like to acknowledge Judith, who works with me in Dunedin and basically manages the logistics of our sampling network, which are huge, working with these partners, getting our sampling crates in and out, communicating with them, and then also doing the lab analysis and managing all the data. And of course, I'd like to thank all the people who are taking samples for us from all of those different sites and from all of those different backgrounds from throughout Aotearoa, New Zealand. So thank you, Jessie. I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Kim, and all the partners for presenting today, but also for hanging on a couple minutes beyond for these great set of presentations. And I hope that you all feel like I do. They're well worth it. Kim, I just so appreciate that presentation. It's perfection to think about how methodical the work that you have been doing along with your partners to build out the monitoring community, the network, and the community of practice, and to see how that is both informing the international sphere, like SDG goals, the WMO provisional statement on climate, but also thinking about the national policy, National Marine Environment State of the Report, Department of Conservation Climate Change Adaptation Plan, and the biggest, not the biggest, but we get a lot of questions through the Alliance about how best to engage these regional and local actors. And I think your presentation really helps bring some of those questions together, or provide some clarity on how that type of local to national network can be cohesive and meaningful across different scales. So thank you. And thank you to all of our partners who have hung on today. Like I said, please feel encouraged to use the chat box. If you want to throw some questions in there, I can collect them and distribute them to different presenters as needed. Thank you to all the presenters today. You guys are really a dream team of OA practitioners, both from the science and the policy and decision-making perspective. So thank you. And we'll, like always, make sure that this recording becomes available. I think I'll chunk it up in different presentations so people can choose different presentations to watch on their own time. And thank you for being here.